Edged sword. So what can you okay, back to the double-edged sword when you're saying everything is it, then we don't know what it is.
Right.
Because that's you can do anything. But then okay, we're back to the confusion. The confusion between people entering, what is it,
Right.
etc. We have different schools of thought.
And that's
All
just
right.
from a battle perspective.
Right, right. Okay. Okay. Where so you made an interesting point about if someone says waving is waving, someone says tutting is tutting. So I see a lot when in anime, and you've seen it too. When you enter an animation event, you will see people roboting.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be see people hitting.
Mm-hmm.
What is the difference between robot and animation?
Okay. So I have my own definition for each of these things,
Mhm.
and they are each based in the fundamental principle, not necessarily the execution, but the principle of what is being communicated.
Mm.
Within animation, as I said earlier, my understanding of animation, my definition of animation is how you dance with the illusion of time.
How you dance with the illusion of time. That would be the definition, your definition.
That is my definition of
Okay.
animation. It is a how, not a what. It is a dance, so dance must be in the definition. The illusion, the illusionary dance form is really important, but it's not just any illusion. The illusions are specific to time, right? If it
Mm.
was just illusion, then bone breaking would also be animation.
Right. Magic
And
tricks. If I could do
right,
that, like
and that's not to say that you can't bone break and animate at the same time. No, what I'm saying is that those are not the fundamental principles that define it, that make it clearly identifiable from anything else. If you
mm.
put bone breaking next to animation, right, you should be able to see a difference, right? So even if you did bone breaking, you should be able to instantly know when someone's animating, and the techniques of the illusion within the illusion of time do this. It's
Mm.
very simple and very easy to understand when
Mm.
people who are consciously aware of these illusionary techniques
Mm.
actively, consciously use them.
Mm.
Robot is a character-based form that is limited by a rule set of movement that's typically mechanical,
Okay.
right? And a proxy for being mechanical, right? So we've got this idea of it is a character-based form. Now, why do I say it's character-based in this specific instance? Um, because a lot of times robot shares a lot of similar techniques to animation. The difference is the principle within their execution, right? The
Mm.
principle within the foundation. If you break character when you are roboting, it is very, very noticeable.
Mm.
Excuse me.
Mhm.
If you are, but if you leave the music, it's acceptable.
Mhm.
You can ignore beat after beat after beat while being in robot, and typically, as long as you eventually come back to the music, you are considered robot dancing,
Mm.
dancing with the robot, right?
Mhm.
And so the consistency of your rule set is really important, right? Being able to maintain the same rule set. What do I mean by rule set? This
Mm.
idea of a limit. So whether you are just moving one joint at a time,
Mhm.
right? This idea of stopping, moving one joint at a time, or maybe it's something more fluid, right? If you're creating this experience of something that's like a little more human, right? There's a
Mhm.
rule set, but the way I'm moving is very consistent.
Yes.
And so my ability to commit to this kind of consistency of a rule set, right, is what helps make it unique, is what helps identify it as robot as a dance style, not just doing robot for 4 seconds like you would do like you would see in a popping competition.
Mm.
Like
Mhm.
in popping, if somebody does robot, they're usually hitting,
Mhm.
and then they'll do like a robot for like a few seconds, and then they'll go back to hitting. Boom,
Mm.
boom, boom. Because the purpose, the foundation of popping is hitting. So the longer you spend not doing the fundamental
You're
principle,
getting away.
you're getting further and further away from the goal of the expression, or at
Mm.
least how it's understood to be expressed in the current meta, right? And so with robot, right, it's really important that you stick to that, just like you would stick to the concept of popping, right?
Yeah.
You want to stick to the character of the robot, even if you're sacrificing musicality. Now, I reference the sacrifice of musicality in the context that I perceive robot to be a dance form. Not everybody does,
Right.
and you would be relatively surprised at who doesn't. I know I was. And so some people don't believe that robot is a dance. And in that sense, why would you follow the music? Right? To which I would usually follow up with, well, why is there music there in the first place? If it's not a dance form, why is it in the background?
Right.
And so regardless, just because your relationship to the music is different doesn't mean that the music is not important, and that
Right.
doesn't not make it not a dance.
Right.
So to review, right, robot is a character-based form. The longer you stick to that character, and your ability to change from one rule set to another must remain consistent and must be clear, right? That is what must be clear, is how you are a character and how you experience, how you express that character
Right.
through your limitation, the rules that you've given yourself, as well as the music.
Right. Which being, and they're all, let me just check real quick something. Wonderful. I'm glad I was still recording. I was like, oh no, I have to say that again. But continue.
Yeah, so that is that's for robot, right? Did you want, just so we can have that all in one clip, did you want me to say both of those things again? Just the definition of robot right next to the definition of animation?
Yes.
Yeah. So for me, robot is a character-based form that focuses on its limits and the way it transitions between those limits. Ultimately, the way it moves through music must be focused in that character. Once you break the character, you fall out of robot. Animation is how you dance with the illusion of time, right? That is my particular perspective of it.
Nice.
This is my conclusion after hours of research and interviewing other people, and also figuring out the concepts in general, because you can change the kind of character that you are at any moment. The form does not dictate who you are or how you are dancing. You are free to choose whatever form you want. Whereas robot is distinct.
It's a form.
It must relay, the form must adhere and be bound by the character. Whereas in animation, you are free to use a character or not at any point.
Right.
Right.
This is interesting because what you're saying, again, like the form, to do robot, you are taking the form of some mechanical robotic thing. Whatever, if it's an android, that's why they have android, they have a,
Yes.
what are the Chuck E. Cheese?
Animatronic.
Animatronic. So it always goes back to, it has to be this machinery. I wish I had water.
It's all good. It's all good. I'll be fine.
It goes back to being some machinery character, while animation doesn't have to limit, doesn't have to stay to a particular what.
Yes.
Which I think that makes, when people think of animation, they go to, I need to be a character. I remember, I don't know if you've seen this clip. I think it was in Back to the Future some years ago.
Okay.
Where it was a guy doing Scorpion. Do you remember this? Do you remember a video?
I don't think so.
He went on the floor and he put his one leg back as a tail, and he had his two pinchers, and he was a scorpion. And it made, and I'm sure, and perhaps, I don't know, but it seemed like to me he was focusing on the form.
Yeah.
I am some creature. Yeah. I am an animal, and I'm dancing with the animal. Thus animation, which then thus goes to the character thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. From my, like, one, I think it's always really cool to be creative. I want people to be expressive in what they're doing. You don't. The purpose of foundation is something that you build upon. When I say that I am for a specific school of thought within animation related to the technique of the illusion of time, I am not negating character.
No.
I think, and that's why I say that I believe that character makes a good animator great. But
right, the core, the bone of it,
right,
is the deeperness. Because you can, I think we talked about this about, okay, if character is the bone, then let's push character as far as it can be. And if I'm Jim Carrey, I'm being a character like that. There's something still that doesn't make me feel satisfied to say it's animation. Or if I, let's say weirdness is the main bone of it, if I push the weirdness, there's still something that feels not, something is still missing. But if I say time is the manipulation of time is the main thing, and if I try to push it, I mean, it all still stays animated. If I go, what's the wildest thing I could manipulate time? Like fast forward myself. It still works. It still seems that people seem to give it a thumbs up. If I say slow it down as much as I can.
Yeah.
If I say like reverse, like it still fits. I can't. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I do want to specify that it's the illusion of time, right? That's why I don't just say time or timing. Interestingly enough, out of all the people I asked for what I go around doing this same kind of thing, and I asked lots of people, what's the definition of animation? Out of just about everybody I've asked, the person who gave me the most clear and concise definition that I agree with, or that I mostly agree with, is Tabo. And when I asked him, what is animation? He said, timing, in one word. And I understand the principle from which he like garners that perspective. However, a big thing that I do is whenever I get a definition, I try to break that definition. Because that's how you know a definition works, is if you try to prove it wrong. And if you try to prove it wrong and it succeeds, then you know you have a pretty solid definition. And if you try to prove it wrong and the definition fits something that doesn't belong, or it doesn't include something that should be within it, then that it feels like that definition doesn't work, right? And so when Tabo said timing, right, I was like, oh, that's really good. And then I thought, well, hold on a second. Tap dancers have some of the greatest timing as far as consciously inducing timing in their movements. They are very much focused on timing. They make the music. But is all tap dancing automatically animation? And after thinking about that for 1 second, I think I came to the conclusion that no, and tap dancing is not animation by itself. Could you tap dance and add animation and make it more explicitly animation? Absolutely, because animation is a how, not a what. You can apply it to anything. From that point of view, I'd say I agree with timing being a good definition, about 80%.
Can you explain what is timing?
Timing.
Yes.
Just consciously being able to play with the when you make choices.
Okay.
And how long you make those choices for. So that's the basic idea, from what I understand, is when you choose to induce a particular speed or a concept, how long you stay in it, how quickly you change it, how quickly you just, how the difference in the amount of time between inducing one idea and the next, a juxtaposition, right? And so this is, you can extrapolate this into a lot of different directions, right, for timing, but basically it's when you make your choices, and for how long.
Okay, and how long. Okay, interesting, right. And I like how you're saying about see the definition and then see if you can break it down. If there's something that doesn't fit in it, then it's like,
yeah,
all right. You talked about, back to the definition of animation, which was Dancing. Can you say it again? Dancing.
Oh, my
Yes,
definition of
your
animation?
definition of
It
animation.
is how you
How
dance,
you dance
with the
with
illusion
the illusion
of time.
time. How does one dance? What's the dancing part of animation? Because people say, "What's the steps?
Mhm.
What's the move? What's
Mhm.
the?" What would you say to that?
Well, to me, this is where I've simply expressed the principle, and I don't want to codify the exact technique
Hmm.
behind this portion of the definition. So dance is intentionally left a little bit open. I think there's a concept that I briefly touched on where I mentioned earlier, I believe, this idea of codifying the principle, not its execution.
Hmm.
Codifying the principle, not
Okay.
necessarily the technique,
Okay.
right? And so the reason I did this is because in my investigation of what is animation to a bunch of other people,
Mm-hmm.
I actually found resistance to people wanting to define it. There were people who said things to the effect of, we shouldn't define animation because for two reasons. One, there's a lot of freedom in animation, and that's what makes it special.
Mm.
And two, we don't want what happened to popping to happen to animation.
Mm.
So once popping kind of became more so about the hit, and I guess Boogaloo, right,
Mm-hmm.
also included in that, it kind of became the exclusive culture.
Mm.
So to the extent where if you had, from a battle perspective, two dancers who had equivalent value, but one of them like easily both on beat, easily both hitting very hard, if you didn't know which way to vote, people would vote on the person who did less other stuff and more boogaloo and just hitting,
Mm.
right? So it became, and it's getting to the point where there is a lot of, even more so than it used to be, a lot of dancing that is expressed very similarly.
Mm.
So this is something that I refer to as the locking effect, where like a style just kind of like locks into place, and like the culture no longer accepts new input from itself.
Mm.
It says that the culture is what it used to be and nothing else. It's this one particular moment in time. That time could span generations, or it could span one particular era. Whatever it is, it's just locked in place. And so it's no longer accepting submissions
Mm.
for additional creativity to be widely considered a staple of that culture,
Mm.
right? And so that's what I want to avoid. Is I want when you codify techniques, when you codify the specific technique, the form of foundation, it makes a lot of this locking to become inevitable, because the more people attempt to really truly understand just the foundation but don't build on it, the more everyone starts to look the same.
Mm. Mm.
So from that perspective, i I leave the concept of dance to be open to interpretation.
Dance.
But to me, dance is simply your relationship with music.
Mm.
And good dancing is usually a harmonious relationship with the music. So that as the music change, your choices also change
Mm.
in direct relationship, in direct proportion. So that's the idea,
Mm.
is that whether you're super groovy, or whether you use a bounce, whether you stand still and just kind of move from side to side, whether your arm is the pendulum for what creates a beat, whether you're not using a 2-point beat at all. and you're using a count of 3 within a song that's in 4/4, right? This is your
Hmm.
relationship to the music,
Gotcha.
right? This is up to you, and I think this is one of the things that Tabo plays with when he talks about timing. This is one of the things that I think makes animation particularly powerful because you can do this kind of thing. If you want it to bounce on the groove, you can. If you want to absolutely stand still and kind of ignore the music, you can, right? But usually, from my perspective, we want harmonious relationship between our movement and the music so that they happen concurrently. So when there's a major change or a minor change within the music, there is a major change, a respective major change or minor change within the dance.
Mm. Which will transition now into the music of
Yeah.
animation dance.